Welcome to the All-Star Mindset Podcast, your guide to mastering the mental game and unlocking your full potential in business, sport, and life. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the All-Star Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Hebert, and before we get into today's episode, I wanted to take a step back for a moment and address what has become a rebranding of this podcast. So if you've been listening since the beginning, you'll know that most of the podcast episodes that we have done have been surrounding athletics and athletic performance. While there have been several other episodes that have discussed topics besides athletics, because the name of the podcast has been the All-Star Athlete Podcast, as well as the scope of All-Star Mindset being mainly to address athletes and athletic performance, particularly from the mental perspective, most of the episodes in the past and the guests that have been on the show have been athletic facing. The All-Star Athlete Podcast will now become the All-Star Mindset Podcast, which mirrors the name of my business, All-Star Mindset, and also reflects a wider audience that I hope to address with the mindset and mental performance techniques that we talk about on this show. So I just wanted to get that brief bit of information out of the way. Moving forward, you will see this podcast listed as the All-Star Mindset Podcast. It is the same show. We will just be covering a slightly wider variety of topics, and we may have some other guests on the show that are not specific to athletic participation. As for today's episode, we won't be doing an interview. Today's episode will be similar to the first 10 episodes of the podcast, where it was just me talking about mental performance techniques, what they are, why you should care about them, and how to implement them in your life. Today's episode will be a little bit more about me personally, as I thought that sharing some information about my background, who I am, and where I came from might be insightful as to anybody listening who may be interested in following a similar career path or wondering maybe where I learned about these techniques that I talk about on the show and that I teach to some of my clients. So some of the information in the next couple of episodes will be very personal. It will be very vulnerable. My hope is that this information will resonate with you as the listener, because one of the things that I realized about social media and podcasting and really anything that you hear about other people's lives, including many professionals, is that there's this common misconception that everyone is perfect. And lately, I've really been leaning into the I'm not perfect angle, even though I'm a mindset coach and I'm supposed to be the expert of these things, these techniques, these tools. The truth is, I make mistakes every day. I had to learn the hard way. I failed many, many different times across a variety of different aspects of my life. But I think that has made me stronger as a person. And many of these experiences that I've had have shaped me into the person who I am today. So for today's main story, I wanted to talk about my younger years playing World of Warcraft. Now, I know this might sound like a little bit of a curveball, but I'll be the first to admit that I am a nerd. I have always enjoyed playing video games. I have artwork hung up around my room that is very nerdy in nature. I was actually just at Comic-Con down here in San Diego a couple of weeks ago. I actually have a Lord of the Rings tattoo on my forearm and a Master Sword from The Legend of Zelda on my calf. So, why am I talking about World of Warcraft? Some of you may have heard of this game before. Some of you may not have heard of it before. World of Warcraft is an MMORPG. And what does that stand for? That means Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. It is a game that was created by Blizzard Entertainment, and I believe that I started playing World of Warcraft back in 2004. I played the original World of Warcraft when it came out, and I played for about 6 or 7 years. This is when I was a teenager, into my early 20s, and I've always enjoyed video games. That's something about me personally. I've always been a bit of a nerd. I actually used to work in the tech industry prior to my current career as a personal trainer and mindset coach. That's a story for a different episode, but the fact of the matter is, I used to play this video game, and I played it a lot. During the height of my World of Warcraft playing days, there were frequently days that I would play 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day of this video game. Now, this is not something that I often admit, and depending on the day is not something that I'm necessarily proud of, but what I can say about my experience playing World of Warcraft is that it taught me a lot. And despite the fact that it's just a video game, as some of you listening may be kind of rolling your eyes or immediately categorizing me into some, stereotypical category, or maybe you have had similar experiences playing video games and this is really resonating with you. Either way, the point I'm trying to make is that when I was playing World of Warcraft, I was dedicated to being the absolute best that I could be at this game. So you might expect that with the number of hours that I put into World of Warcraft. But when I was playing, I was committed day in and day out to be the absolute best that I could be at this game. So I participated actually in both features of World of Warcraft, which is to say there is the raiding component, which is what we refer to as player versus environment. So raiding is with a group of other people, and you form a team, and you attempt to tackle instances or raid dungeons, as they're called, where there's bosses that you're teaming up to try and kill together. The other aspect of World of Warcraft that I participated in was player versus player. So many of you who are familiar with video game player versus player type environments may have heard of Counter-Strike, Modern Warfare, Call of Duty, League of Legends, among other Overwatch, among other games where you're playing against other people. So it was a very competitive 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, 5v5 type environment where, again, you're teaming up usually with a couple of other players against some live human competition. The reason that I'm talking about all this is because with the amount of hours that I put into this game, it was more of a job for me. And it was something that I cared deeply about and I wanted to be the best at, which is a personality trait, I would say, that I've always had. There's several other examples that I can give, including school performance and my performance as a youth sport athlete, where I always strove to be my best no matter the circumstances. Now, as it relates to World of Warcraft, I achieved what I would say are some of the highest honors within the game when I was playing it. So when I was raiding, as I was mentioning, with a large team of other players, early on in my playing days, I was actually a raid/guild leader, which meant that, for lack of a better example, I was in charge of the business or the organization. I was in charge of designing strategies and organizing people to do specific jobs when we were trying to conquer these raid dungeons, as they were called. So I had a tremendous amount of responsibility, and I had to perform under pressure. I was telling people what to do. I was in charge of other people succeeding or not. I developed a lot of public speaking skills because I had to speak frequently in front of large groups of people and not really care about what other people thought of me. And as far as the player versus player, I achieved some of the highest rankings in that regard as well. For anybody that's familiar with World of Warcraft, I achieved rank 1 Gladiator, which is an honor that is reserved for only a select 0.001% of players. Basically, I was the best player, quote unquote, at my class of a specific, what are called arenas or battlegrounds. Towards the end of my playing days, I also achieved something like number 5 in the world at achievement points earned. So anybody that's familiar with any kind of video games, you're familiar with platinum trophies or achievement points, where when you accomplish something within the game, you get kind of like it's like a made up currency, a point system showing what you've achieved. And amongst a population of probably millions and millions of people that were playing this game, I was actually, I think, 5th in the world at having accumulated these in-game points. So if that doesn't tell you that I was playing this game a lot, really nothing else will. Now, when I was playing World of Warcraft, I wasn't really thinking about my future very much. It was just a pastime. It was a game to have fun and to challenge myself and to grow. And for a lot of people listening, you may sort of be dismissing this as, well, it's just a game, it doesn't really matter. But looking back, there was a lot of things that I learned about myself that carry through to who I am today. As I mentioned, with the comparisons to performance in school, of which I always got good grades, and youth sports, to which I was very frequently the MVP of my team at the end of the season, the carry through here is that when I cared deeply about something, I was always going to put my best effort towards it. And frequently, if not always, I would come out either at the top or very near the top. All the while playing World of Warcraft, I developed leadership skills. I had consistency without any external validation. There were these soft or hard skills that I was developing. For example, I would interview people that were trying to get into my guild of raiders, so I was developing interview skills, public speaking skills, and I would be remiss to say that there was not like an opportunity cost at this time for the number of hours that I put into playing World of Warcraft and the years of my life in which I participated in playing this game, which I don't need to say any more other than these hours of this game took place from when I was about 16 to 22 years old. So I'm guessing if you're listening to this podcast, you're at least 16 years old. And if you're older, you remember what you were doing, or maybe what you wish you had been doing when you were somewhere between 16 and 22 years old. And maybe you were playing a video game just like me for hours on end, or maybe you were doing something else. But you can imagine the sense of, I tend to shy away from the word regret, but you can imagine some of the regrets that I have about the other things that I could have been doing with my time when I was that age. But I don't want to talk too much about that in this episode. That's maybe a topic for another episode. What I want to spend more time talking about in today's episode are the techniques specifically that I was actually using when I was playing World of Warcraft that I wasn't really aware of at the time. But as a mindset coach now, looking back, these are some of the things that I was utilizing to become that best player that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that are techniques that I actually use personally to this day for myself, as well as to teach my mindset coaching clients. So what are those techniques exactly? The first one is the idea of having a growth mindset. A growth mindset, put simply, is a belief in your ability to grow, improve, or learn at a skill, a talent, an ability, or anything of that nature where you are not currently the best, but it's a belief in your ability to get better despite your current ability level. And this is in contrast to what we call a fixed mindset, which is kind of a defeatist mindset wherein you believe that no matter what your skill is right now, that's just who you are, and that is just what your skill, talent, intellect, ability level is, and that no matter how much effort or learning or training you do, you're not going to get better. So I had played a lot of video games prior to when I picked up World of Warcraft. I'm really a lifelong gamer. I still actually play to this day. But I was not the best at World of Warcraft when I first started playing. But I didn't let that stop me from becoming the best. I knew that if I put in the hours and I put in the time and I worked with my teammates and I looked up strategies online and I failed and I got defeated and I picked myself up and I got back in there again and I tried again. And it's this iterative cycle wherein I failed, I got defeated, my character died, I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve, and I knew that I was getting better. Subjectively, objectively, my results would get better day after day after day. My gear would get better. My ability rotation would get better. My decision making would get better. My communication would get better, and it did. And so it's this growth mindset that I was using when I was playing the game that I wasn't really aware of at the time, but it's a technique and a skill and an ability that carries through to this day. And so despite the fact that this was taking place while I was playing a video game, again, a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at video games, although this is becoming less so as the general population ages, because my parents' generation didn't have video games when they were growing up. And so, like, quote unquote, adults didn't play video games. But my generation, which is to say I'm a millennial, had video games when we were children. And so now many adults play video games, and it's not quite so taboo anymore because it's just been something that we've done for our whole lives. And so the point I'm trying to make is that there are skills that are translatable that you can learn and develop when you're playing video games. And I wish I could go back and tell my mom or my dad back then that I was like actually training for some real world skills. You, as someone who's maybe younger and playing video games, may be able to point to this episode and say, look, see, like I am actually training something that's tangible here. But growth mindset being one of the skills that I used back when I was playing video games to grow and improve and get better. The other one, and it's tied to growth mindset, is the idea of deliberate practice. So deliberate practice as opposed to just regular practice, because someone may go out and practice anything and hope that they get better at it. But the thing about practice versus deliberate practice is repetition of a specific skill or technique or ability that is combined with immediate feedback and intent to improve a very specific angle or part of that talent or ability. So, in other words, it's not just hours spent doing something. Because if I practice, for example, let's take golf, for example. If I pick up a golf club and I'm practicing swinging a golf club, but I'm doing it the wrong way, I'm not really going to get that much better. I might get better at hitting the ball, but I'm not getting better in the way that is appropriate for becoming the best possible golfer that I can be. Now, to take the same example, if I'm a golfer and I want to get better at golf and I hire a coach, now I'm practicing my golf swing. I'm getting immediate feedback from the coach about what I'm doing wrong, and I can implement it immediately into my swing. And then I can swing again and I get more immediate feedback, and I have a specific intent on I'm trying to work on this particular aspect of my game, such as chipping or putting or driving. That is deliberate practice. And so this was also something that I did in World of Warcraft. Again, at the time, I didn't know what growth mindset was or deliberate practice were, but in looking back, I can see that these were the early years of utilizing these tools and techniques. And when I was playing World of Warcraft, I would see that I wasn't doing the right thing, but I would go online and I would look up strategies, or I would talk to other people that played the same class that I did in this game and ask them what they're doing. I would watch videos. I would see how other people were doing it. And then I would go back and try again. And I would be trying to improve one specific thing about my gameplay. And so it was this idea of deliberate practice combined with the growth mindset that allowed me to eventually, over the years of playing this game, become the best player that I could be, and arguably one of the best in the world. Not to kind of stroke my own ego, but like objectively, there were these metrics that showed that I was one of the best in the world at the game. And so, like, why does this all matter? Why am I telling this story about World of Warcraft? Well, the point is, it's not about World of Warcraft. This is something that happened in my life. And there are other examples of things that I've done in my life that I have used this iterative process of, and this passion and this dedication and this commitment. And the fact of the matter is, to become the best you can be at anything in life, it requires this lengthy, iterative growth mindset, deliberate practice, experience in order to become the best at something. So, for example, if you work in sales, the first day that you walk onto a sales job, you're not going to be selling very much. You're not going to know what to say. You're not going to know how to handle objections. You're not going to pitch people correctly on the right price points. You don't know how to downsell. You don't know how to upsell. You just don't know how to do it. But through failing and taking notes and working with a mentor, you can eventually become good at sales or golf, right? These are all different examples that I can give. Let's take entrepreneurship, for example, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this isn't about sports anymore. Let's say you started a business, you launched a product. How often does someone's first product succeed? Anybody in the business and entrepreneurship world will tell you probably close to never does anybody's first product succeed. Why is that? Because when you're launching something, maybe you think you have an idea of what people want, but your execution of delivering that product, whether it's a soft or a hard product, in other words, like a soft product being something like a podcast like this, or a hard product being like a supplement or anything else that you might sell people, that you might sell on Etsy or Amazon or something like that. Frequently, if not always, your first attempt is not going to succeed. But the fact of the matter is, it's not actually a failure as long as you learn something from it and you apply that. You go back to kind of square one, the blueprints, the foundations, and you apply what you learned to the next iteration and you make it a little bit better. And through this iterative, deliberate practice, growth mindset type procedure, no matter what it is that you're trying to accomplish in life, you can eventually become better and eventually become the best, quote unquote, whether that's top 5%, top 1%, right? These sorts of things, you can make it as long as you have this commitment to having a growth mindset and practicing and going back and improving and trying again. And it takes hours and hours and hours and days and weeks and months and maybe even longer than that. So understanding that patience is definitely key here as well. There's really no such thing as overnight success. Yeah, maybe somebody hits the jackpot and goes viral for some ridiculous reason. That's like 1 in a million. But the large majority of successful people that you see, like as the saying goes, there is no magic pill. It takes hard work, dedication, effort, commitment, consistency, resilience, discipline, all of these ideas, right? I'm touching on several of them, and subsequent episodes of this podcast will go into some of these other ideas. But the fact of the matter is, successful people have a lot more failures and unseen reps than you'd guess. In fact, most of the most successful people that you've ever seen, whether it's today on social media or people you've heard about in the past, whether it's athletes, business gurus, podcast hosts, those people have been willing to fail more than anybody else. Those people have failed more than anybody else. And it's because of those failures that they've learned and they have succeeded. So the takeaway here is pretty simple. I'm not asking you to go play World of Warcraft, which is still a game that people are playing these days. The point is, whatever it is that you are choosing to spend your time doing, first of all, it's going to take a lot of time, and we're talking weeks, months, years, or longer to achieve that success that you're hoping to achieve. But I can guarantee you that if you go into anything that you're trying to accomplish with a growth mindset and you approach it with the idea of deliberate practice, you can become the best or in that certain, or certainly in that upper echelon, that upper bracket, top 5%, top 1%, top 0.5%, whatever it is. You can achieve that. So that was what I wanted to say in today's episode. A little bit of background information about myself. Subsequent episodes of this show is actually going to go a little bit more into my life. I am a mindset coach. I'm a personal trainer. And I have had a lot of failures in my life, but I haven't let those failures define me. I've learned something from every time that I've hit a bump in the road or a roadblock, or I've gotten knocked down. I get back up again. I go back to the drawing board. I learn something. I apply it. I get better the next iteration. And that's really all we can do to become the best version of ourselves. So in the next episode, I'm going to be talking about another personal story where I went skydiving, which is somewhat related to the World of Warcraft story that I just told today, but there will be several different lessons that I learned along the way, as well as, again, several roadblocks and, bumps in the road that I encountered. But the skydiving story is actually one that's very pivotal and transformative to who I am today. So that's a topic for the next episode. Until then, we're going to be signing out. Once again, this is now the All-Star Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Justin, and I'll catch you all in the next episode.